Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the 8th lecture. I am Dr. Khurram again, your host for this show. Now, in the last lecture, we discussed the strategic aspect, the planning and strategic aspect of logistics management. We discussed basically that first there is a corporate level strategy. That corporate level strategy is based on certain objectives of the firm. Objectives can be profit sharing, it can be social, it can be survival, it can be anything. Based on those objectives, workable plans are made. The strategy is defined, and based on that strategy, workable plans are made for that organization. Now, those objectives and that strategy trickle down to various functional areas like production and marketing and finance and logistics and human resource and all those. They define their own strategies and plans based on the objectives or the strategy plan laid down by the organization for them. Now, similar, we also discussed that the logistics department, for defining the strategy of the logistics department, a similar level of creativity might be required, which is required for developing the objectives of the organization and the strategy and plans of the organization. Now, those smaller objectives and plans at the functional area level are made to ensure that the organizational strategies are complied with. In the logistics department or the logistics management area or supply chain area, there are three broader objectives around which the strategies and plans revolve around. There is, for example, cost reduction, there is capital reduction, and there is service level improvement. Cost reduction was that we reduce the variable cost. Investment reduction was that we reduce. Capital reduction was that we reduce minimize the investment in the logistics system, and improvement in service level was whether to improve the service level of the customer. And then we discussed that there are various levels of plans that are formulated in a logistics department, in every department in fact, but specifically in context of logistics department, there are strategical plans which are like for 1 year and more. There are tactical plans which are less than a year. There are operational plans which are basically day to day or weekly or, for example, hourly plans. The scope of these plans are different, and the data set that is required to ensure the viability of these plans is also different. And since the scope of these plans is different, that would mean that while talking about the transport activity, the whole mode of transport that is required would be basically the strategic plan, whether it is air transport or railway or for example it's ship cargo or it is through trucking. Then tactical plan would be whether new fleets are required to be leased or not for that. An operational plan is day-to-day transport activities. We discussed this, and well, that's about it. We were also discussing that when the plan is required, because whenever there is a major shift in the price and cost of inventories and transportation, price of the product or product characteristics and all that, we discussed that we need to reevaluate the logistics plan that we have. The logistics, we discussed the logistics plan in terms of the logistics strategy triangle, in which there was inventory strategy, location strategy, transport strategy, and the customer service level was in the center of that triangle. So moving on from there, when to plan and how to plan, we need to consider under this planning aspect. There are 6 concepts for logistics strategy formulation that are very important, that are considered important. Now, there is the total cost conflict. We would discuss them one by one. There are very interesting aspects, but these 6 concepts are very important considerations while formulating the logistics strategy. Number 1 is total cost concept, the effect on the total cost actually, because there are conflicting costs. If for example, if we want to reduce the transportation cost by using a slower means of transportation, then the inventory costs would go up. So these are conflicting costs, for example. We will discuss various examples of that also. So we need to consider these costs. Now, based on these conflicting costs, when one would increase, the other would decrease, and if this one would increase, the first one would decrease. We consider the total cost, and we follow wherever the total cost is minimal. Then there is differentiated distributions. Now a single firm might be involved in producing multiple products. When multiple products are being produced, then that would mean that not similar level of service or customer satisfaction, customer service level is required for each product. It might be different across products. So that is discussed under differentiated distribution. What type of products might be focused with given higher level of customer service, where most cost is incurred on logistics strategy rather than the other type of product. Which product is to be delivered on time and when, and what product can be delayed and all that. So there is differentiated distribution rather than a whole pure one system where all the products are treated in one mechanism. There is a mixed strategy and a pure strategy. Now, pure strategy is that the whole logistics systems is followed for all the types of products that the firm has. It is somehow associated to differentiated product concept. Now, the pure strategy would be actually better for administrative ease. The pure strategy would be basically pure strategy of distribution would be utilizing economies of scale. But when there are different types of products and different types of order processing requirements, don't worry, we would explain these concepts with some examples which you would understand in a much better manner. But in order to express them broadly, I just need to go through them once, and then we would come back to them one by one and discuss them in detail. So a pure strategy, but then there are, for example, there is the cost of delivery. For example, if there are 2 or 3 types of customers, one type of a customer orders products in a bulk. You have a full truck load of that product and they order it. Other types of customers order in small chunks. Now, if you follow the same strategy for all of them, the same mode of delivery, same customer's level delivery or service level, it would be very difficult. If, for example, I am ordering a quantity in bulk, then it does not needs to be stored. It would be delivered directly from the factory outlet and from the production facility to the customer in one single truck. It is a big one. Now, when there are smaller orders of various customers, they might be delivered from the warehouse, and they might be consolidated to be delivered. It would be very costly to deliver them in small chunks. So they would be consolidated together to deliver a truckload of them. The delivery time would be different in both of these cases. The customer service level that is being targeted would be different in both of these cases. So that is discussed under differentiated distribution and the mixed strategy. We would come to that. Then there is postponement. Delay formation of the final product as long as possible. Postponement is in terms of time and in terms of form. Whenever we delay the delivery of a product to the maximum time you can delay it, that is time postponement. Whenever you delay the product in terms of its form, that how it is made, that is form postponement. In terms of form postponement, it would be easier if I give you an example. For example, Dell Computers. Dell Computers does form postponement. It does not create a product and put it in a market. Once you place an order, for example, a specific type of Dell laptop that you need with this type of motherboard, with this type of level of hard disk, with this type of RAM, with this, whether it needs to have a graphic card or not, they have everything ready, but they assemble it and send it once the order has been placed. So they delay the form until the order has been placed. That is form postponement. Then there is shipment consolidation. We discussed that in mixed strategy and differentiated distribution also, that smaller shipment charges have disproportionately higher transportation costs than larger ones, because when you ship items in a smaller chunks, that would be expensive rather than when you deliver them as a truckload of them, for example. Then product standardization, because if you create more varieties, that inventory storage cost and transportation cost and production scheduling would automatically increase, while making smaller changes in the characteristic of the product would be very expensive. So what you do is that you try to standardize certain types of certain characteristics of the product, so that we can say that in many cases, like for example, there are so many parts of a car that are available in all the cars of Toyota company. whether it is a Corolla or it is Altis or it is Mark X or whatever type of the car it is. Mark X is not Corolla, Toyota, I think Toyota Mark X, yeah. But the point is that that is standardization. There are certain types that are placed in all those cars, but actually the labels are different, and in some sense many things are different. Of course, I'm not saying that they are exactly the similar cars, and then there are certain companies who would just label the same product with different brand names. There is, for example, if there are 2 or 3 types of tea, there is some minimal difference in between their taste and their qualities, but they are labeled differently. So that type of product standardization, where you can use certain things for all the types of the products, standardization actually reduces the cost. Now going back, now all these 6 concepts of logistic strategy formulation, let us start with the total cost concept. When we are looking at the total cost concept, we need to consider the trade-off analysis. Trade-off between different costs, different types of costs. There is, for example, transportation costs, there are inventory costs. I would give you examples and then we would move on and look at the graph of each cost and see what exactly we mean by trade-off analysis. Now, the trade-off is actually in between the 2 conflicting costs. There are that conflicting costs would mean that if you try to reduce one type of cost, the other cost would go up. If you try to reduce this cost would go up. That is, these are conflicting costs, that they move in opposite directions. So what would be the optimum level of a service or whatever optimal level of the cost? The lowest cost. But which cost is to be minimized? What we do is that we look at the total cost and see if that is minimized. Now let us assume there is direct cost of transport surface versus indirect cost of inventory levels. I would explain that better. You would understand that better in a graph. Now here is a graph in which on the y-axis there is cost in dollars. On the x-axis there is transportation service, right? From origin to along the x-axis there is rail, truck and air. From origin to x-axis to air, the speed of transportation and reliability, dependability is increasing. Rail would take more time as compared to air, and dependability is also increasing. That if the air through, when you send through air cargo, if you say when you are going for a delivery of a product and when you are going for like through air cargo service, you can easily say that I can deliver that in a week, because you can ensure that it is more reliable and it can deliver that product from this region to that region in 2 or 3 days, and the rest is just a cushion to ensure that. But when you are going through rail, it would take more time. If you are going through truck, it would take less time than rail, but it would take more time than air. So along the x-axis there is transport service, the mode of transport that is being used, and then greater speed and dependability is also there. Then if you look at the first graph, it is marked as cost of transportation service. With greater speed, with greater dependability, the cost goes up. When you use air, the cost is the highest. When you use truck, the cost is somewhere in between. When you use railroad, the truck is railway service, the cost is minimum. So from this point to that point, the cost is increasing. From rail to air, the cost of transportation is increasing. Now there is a trade-off. With this increase in the speed of the cost of you can say the transportation is increasing. But on the other hand, the inventory levels are reducing. If you look at the lower graph, inventory cost includes storage and transit costs. That graph is highest above rail and is lowest near air cargo. The point is that when you use air cargo, you have more reliability. If you have a product, you can ensure its delivery on time through using air cargo. So you do not need to keep higher levels of inventory. So your cost of inventory would be lower. While on the other hand, when you use a mode of transportation which is not very reliable and which is not very dependable and it is very slow, then you would automatically have to keep a higher level of inventory at different warehouses. You cannot depend on that mode of transportation very well. So with increase in dependability, the inventory cost goes down, but with the decrease in dependability, the inventory cost goes up. There is a trade-off. The inventory cost is highest when you are using rail mode of transportation. Inventory cost is lowest when you use air mode of transportation. And similarly, when you use air freight, its cost as such of the transportation itself is greater, and its cost, the cost of transportation is lowest when you use railway carriage. Now you see the difference there. These are conflicting costs. If you try to reduce one, the other one goes up. The inventory cost and transportation costs are at conflict over here. So how do you think you can, at what point should you utilize what type of transportation and which one would be better in which environment? Now do remember that this is a generic graph. It might be different from, you can say, product to product and company to company and industry to industry. It might be different for different different scenarios or different segments, but still, or different industries. But the overall methodology would remain same. We would use the total cost curve. Total cost curve actually is the sum of these two cost curves. One cost curve is for the inventory cost and the other cost curve is for the transportation cost. When you add them up, you have total cost curve. Now when the if you look at the left side above rail, the cost curve is higher. It goes down where the trucks are being used, and it goes up again where air is being used. Air freight is being used. So that would mean the truck would be the point where the costs are lowest. So this is the total cost concept. As I mentioned earlier, that we are currently discussing, while let me go back a slide and explain it to you. When we are discussing different concepts for strategy formulation for a firm, for the logistics department of a firm, we use total cost concept. The total cost concept discusses the trade-off. It does the trade-off analysis, trade-off between the conflicting costs. So we have over here two conflicting costs. One is the cost of transportation and other the inventory cost. With greater cost of transportation, the reliability of that system increases, so you do not need to keep much inventories. With the lower cost of transportation, the reliability and dependability decreases, so you have to keep higher inventories. Now these two add up to the total cost, and you operate preferably at the point where the total cost is minimum, because that is the cost that you have to bear in total. So that is the total cost concept, and over here the dotted line represents where the total cost curve is at its lowest point. So you might use trucking service for that. It can be a combination also. If assuming the total cost was somewhere aligned in such a manner that the dotted line would have been between truck and air service, then that would automatically mean that you use a combination of these two somehow. Then another example for the total cost concept about the trade-off analysis and trade-off between conflicting costs. If you are targeting higher level of customer service, that results in decreased lost sales. You retain your customers, right? You target a higher level of customer service, and you definitely in that sense you have higher customer retention and more customer attraction and more customer loyalty. But against that, there are other costs that increase. There is, for example, cost of transportation, there is cost of inventory, and there is cost of order processing. If you look at the graph, on the y-axis there are costs, and on the x-axis there is customer service level, improved customer service. A graph is a little bit frizzy, or it's a little, I guess, in the bold form, but you have to bear with it. I would explain it. You can find it in the book also, and I would explain it. I hope you would understand, because it is not that difficult. It is a little bit, I guess, picture is clearer. It's not that bad. No, the point is that improved customer service is represented on the x-axis from 0% to 100%. When you are targeting 0% customer services, that would mean that your lost sales are maximum. There is one line that is at the highest. Just for the moment, ignore the total cost curve. Look at the lost sales cost curve. That is highest where you are targeting a low level of customer satisfaction, and it is lowest when you are targeting 100% customer service level, maximum customer service that can be given for a product or a service. Now that is going down with the total cost of lost sales, the opportunity cost in some sense. The cost of lost sales is going down with increase in the customer service level. And on the other hand, we already discussed that many times, that with increase in customer services, the transportation cost, the inventory cost and order processing cost would go up. Again, going back to my favorite example that we've discussed many times, the Domino's pizza. With that 30-minute or less thing, the Domino's pizza has to incur more transportation and inventory costs. It has to ensure that when I pick up my phone to order, they have many sales representative available to receive that order so that my call does not bounce back. When I place that order of a certain type of pizza over there, then they have to ensure that ingredients for that pizza are readily available in all the shops. You see, because when I place an order in the phone, currently all these international chains have changed the system a little bit. The service outlets are, for example, in Islamabad, in Lahore, in Karachi, and even in different regions of Islamabad, Lahore region, there would be one in Gulbarg, one in Liberty. For example, if we talk about McDonald's, there would be one in, one is in F10, one is in Jinnah Park. There are just two in Pindi and Rawalpindi and Islamabad. There are like quite a few in Lahore and quite lots of them in Islamabad. If we just talk about McDonald's. When you dial the universal access number, it goes to a central location. They take that order, and then considering your city and your location where you are, they target the nearest delivery point. And they send that order to the nearest delivery point, and that delivery point actually delivers the order. So when I place the order on the phone, that would mean that the item for which I am ordering that, placing that order for, should be available in stock, right? The ingredients through which it is to be prepared should be available in stock, so it cannot deny me that, okay, this thing is not available today, because that is a central location. They take whatever order from their menu that I place, and they actually inform the service center to deliver that order to me. So there is inventory costs also, there are transportation costs, and there are order processing costs. So once a higher level of customer satisfaction is being targeted, these costs would go up. These are conflicting costs. Once the transportation, order processing, inventory costs are going up, the cost of lost sales goes down. But once you try to reduce the transportation, inventory and order processing cost, the cost of lost sales would go up. So where would we target? Now look at the total cost curve. You ignored it first, and now you should look at it then. Now total cost curve is again minimum at central location, and that is the point where it is minimum is the customer service level that we should target. You see, so this is again a total cost concept. When we are trying to define setting the customer service level, we are doing the trade-off analysis between the conflicting costs. We are doing the trade-off analysis between the conflicting costs. Now another example of the trade-off analysis and the concept of the conflicting cost is that when customers purchase in small quantities and inventory is replenished in large quantities, there are certain types of products when customers would buy in very small quantities, like for example talk about shampoo or talk about any type of detergent or a soap. Every customer would buy a single unit. I would buy only one soap and, for example, one toothpaste or one shampoo. But when the inventory is required to be restocked, it would be stocked in higher quantity. You see, so outbound inventory cost actually exceeds inbound transport cost. When you, as we said, that when the items are delivered in bulk, the transportation cost is lower. When the items are delivered single-handedly, the transportation costs are higher. So outbound inventory costs exceeds the inbound inventory cost. The outbound inventory cost, that single item being delivered to the customer, is at a greater cost than the inbound item being delivered. So in that case, you need to consider the stocking points. You need to consider that where warehouses are being established. So when the outbound inventory cost exceeds the inbound inventory cost, when the customers purchase in the small quantities but the inventory is to be replenished in larger quantities, then in that case there is a decision to be made whether more stocking points are required or not. When such decisions are being considered, then there is inventory versus transportation cost. Why would we need more stocking points? We would need more stocking points to serve the customer on time. When we serve the customer on time, that would automatically mean that we are targeting a higher level of customer satisfaction. When we are targeting a higher level of customer satisfaction, then that would automatically mean again that inventory versus transportation cost would go up. Now look at this graph, increasing number of stocking points. When there is an increase, when we are planning to increase the number of stocking points, that would mean that in terms of cost, on the y-axis, on the left side of the y-axis there are costs, on the right side on the y-axis there are revenues, and on the x-axis there are increase in number of stocking points. When there is increase in number of stocking points, that would automatically mean that the transportation cost would decrease. So now we are evaluating three different trade-offs. Transportation costs going down, because if you look at that, if you remember the last slide, or rather we should go to it, inventory versus transportation costs, that the trade-off between these two, because when we are increasing the number of stocking point or getting, for example, we are getting one more warehouse. If we are getting one more warehouse, that would automatically mean that the cost of inventory would go up, but the cost of transportation would go down. Right? So, but then these two are being considered as a trade-off between the customer service level, because why you are establishing another warehouse, so that you can reduce the delivery time to the customer, and the level of service that you are targeting is being increased. So now look at this, when we increase the number of stocking points, that would mean the inventory costs would go up. But on the other hand, the transportation cost would go down. These two are conflicting costs, but similarly the revenue would also go up. Why the revenue would go up? Because the customer satisfaction level is going up, so revenue is increasing along the increase in the number of stocking points. Now I've just mentioned three different graphs. I hope you understood, or do I need to repeat that? I guess I should mention them one by one. First graph is the inventory cost graph. Inventory cost graph is increasing from the left hand side to the right hand side, and from the left hand side to the right hand side the number of stocking points is being increased. Like there are stocking points for a maybe let's call it warehouses or storage locations are being increased. With that, the inventory costs are going up. Then the second graph I discussed is the cost of the transportation. Now the transportation cost graph is decreasing with increase in number of stocking points, because once you establish a warehouse in some region, you deliver a further away region from that stocking point, and then you decide to establish another stocking point somewhere in between. Then now that initial region that is to be served would be served from this new stocking point, and the distance has reduced, so the cost of transportation would automatically be reduced. So the cost of transportation would reduce with increase in number of stocking points. And then I talk about the revenue, the third graph. The revenue graph is actually increasing with increase in the number of stocking points. And why is that? Because the customer service level is being increased, because now the customers are being delivered that product on time, and once the customers product are being delivered on time, that would automatically mean that they would consume more, and they would be your loyal customer, and the revenue would increase. And from the aspect of the total cost concept, determining the number of warehouses in a logistics system, we need to consider the total cost. But again, the total cost concept, we need to look at the conflicting costs, the inventory costs and the transportation costs. Then another example, a higher level of customer satisfaction, the cost of sales would go down and the inventory carrying cost would go up, the two conflicting costs. The cost of lost sales would go down, where if we increase the average level of inventory with us, that would simply mean, we discussed that in the very start, that if there are, for example, if I go to a shop and I need to buy Mortein, for example, Mortein spray, and if I do not find it on the shelf, I would look for some other spray to kill a mosquito, to spray in my house. The point is that customers might go for replacements. Now, if the customers go for replacements, that would mean that we need to ensure enough inventory levels that whenever there is a demand from the customer, that demand is met. So whenever my customer's customer needs something, they can get it from my customer. And when my customer's stock goes out, it can ask me well in time for the delivery of the items, and I have that item already stocked in my warehouse. So we would discuss that again in some cases, because there are certain types of products that need to be stocked like that, and there are certain types of like high technology goods cannot be produced in large quantities and stock, because once the technology goes out, they are useless and they can be sold anymore. But still, let's discuss. Let's ignore that discussion. We'll go to that later, and maybe in the next lecture or in this lecture we'll see where we can end. So in the cost of lost sales goes down with increase in inventory levels. I have just given you an example that when I go, when the customer needs something, if they do not have that thing, they can switch to another product. So if that item is not available, that is a lost sale, an opportunity cost. The cost of lost sale would go down with increase in aggregate inventory levels, average inventory levels. Now, on the other hand, the inventory cost would go up automatically when you are getting more inventory, when you're accumulating more inventory with you, just to ensure the cost of that there is no cost of lost sales, the cost of inventory would go up. These two are conflicting costs. And then again, the total cost concept, we look at the total cost curve and we look to minimize that total cost curve, and wherever that cost curve is minimum, we target that inventory level. These are very interesting aspects, and these are, I'm not saying that the curves would exactly be like this in a real life environment. These are just to be, these have been drawn to express them in a sense that they are easier to understand. But the conflicting costs do behave like that. It is very intuitively understandable that the cost of lost sales would go down once you keep more inventory. People won't substitute, people won't switch to other products. But once you carry more inventory, the cost of inventory would go up. So that would mean that these two are conflicting costs. If you're targeting a higher level of customer service, the cost would go up for carrying the inventory, but the customer service, the cost of lost sales due to higher customer service would go down. So these are costs which are in conflict with each other, and you need to see the trade-off, and you do the trade-off analysis, and you minimize the total cost. That is the main theme of the discussion that I'm trying to have with you over here. Then another example, in a multi-product scheduling phenomena, if a firm is producing multiple products, the production sequence in which the product is being produced, as well as the time of run of that one production line for one product in a multi-product environment actually defines the cost of production. The sequence as well as the runtime, that defines the cost of production. Now, with changes in that production sequence, there are changes in inventory costs also. Now, if we consider that product run length and product sequencing various alternatives, you can reduce the cost of production. You see, once you are defining the production run length and production sequencing alternatives, there would be certain sequences, and what we are targeting over here is that we are trying to set the sequence of the production runs for multiple products. You have multiple products and you are trying to set the sequence. With that sequence, there would be some sequences that would reduce the cost of production. Now, along the x-axis, the different production length and sequences or alternatives are being listed. Let's assume that. Now, once they are listed along the x-axis, they are decreasing the production cost. So the production costs are decreasing with this production sequence. On the other hand, once the inventory carrying costs are increasing, because once you produce something with in certain production length and that product has been produced, and it takes, and the customer order is here, and it takes time to replenish that. once a new, for example, there are 3 products. One product A is in production run. It takes time to take out that production and shift the whole production setup to product B or product C, right? Once product A is in production and there is an order for product C, it would take time for the whole sequence to change, because you have decided on sequence A from A to B to C. If the order is for product C, then it would take time to reach to that order. If you take time to reach that order, then it would be produced a little bit late. Then the customer might switch to something else. So what you need to do is that when it is time for producing product C, you produce enough of that product and store it in the inventory as an inventory in the warehouse, so that if product A is being produced currently, an order for product C is available, product C is available in the warehouse, you do not regret a customer that we do not have that product. You make enough at its time, at its sequence time, at its schedule, that there is enough available in the stock. So that would automatically mean that inventory carrying cost would increase. Once you reduce once you define a production sequence, if you make it haphazard, the production cost would go up. If you jump from A to C and C to A and you do not maintain the production run length as well as the production sequence, then the costs would go up. If you define the production run length and as well as you define the production sequence, the production cost would go down. On the other hand, when you strictly define that production sequence A, B, C, D, E, F in case of multiple products, then that would increase the inventory carrying cost, because from point A to point C, if you product A to product C, if you cannot produce product C until you finish the production length of product A, then you move on sequence to product B, finish its production length, then you move on to product C. Now that is a huge gap between these two. That would automatically mean that you need to carry enough inventory of product C so that customers are not returned or regretted. So that would increase the product inventory cost. I hope you understand. I hope I have been clear enough to explain that phenomena. The cost of production is dependent on production. If in case of multiple products, in case a firm is producing, for example, soap and shampoo and detergent and stuff like that in one production assembly, and it takes time to switch between one product to the other product. For example, a firm is producing a medicated soap and as well as a soap with different types of fragrances. So in that case, it would take time to switch the production assembly from one unit to other, to next unit to next unit to next unit, next type of product it produces. Now the cost of production is dependent upon, is a function of actually the production length, the production run length, that how many units of one single product is produced, as well as it is a function of the sequence in which the products is produced. Now these are some technical aspects, but still the cost of production depends on that. Now if the cost of production depends on these two, that would automatically mean that in order to reduce the cost of production, you should have a specific sequence with a minimum cost, as well as you should have a specific run length in which the cost is minimum. But on the other hand, when you are so rigid about the sequence and the run length, then you need to ensure that enough inventory is available, because when you are far away for a product in that sequence, that would require that product to be available for the customer in the inventory. Whenever customer asks that for that product, the product is available in the inventory, because if it is not available in the inventory, based on your sequence, it would take time to reach that production sequence. So that would mean that inventory carrying costs increase. Once the inventory carrying costs increase, the inventory carrying cost and the production cost are conflicting costs when they, in case of defining production run length and production sequencing, and when there are in a multi-product environment. So what would be the optimal level would be the total cost level. The total cost concept would be where the total cost is minimized. So an alternative of production run length and production sequencing is chosen where the total cost is minimum. So there is an application to it, a real life example. There was a manufacturer of marine products in USA, a large scale manufacturer. Now, while deciding a stocking point, a warehouse, it had a choice between St. Louis and Chicago. The aim was to minimize the transportation cost. Now, that in order to, while minimizing the transportation cost, they targeted St. Louis. They were planning to buy, this is a real life case study, I don't remember the exact dates, but the overall example is very useful in terms of the total cost concept. Why? In order to reduce the transportation cost, they identified that St. Louis was the point where we need to establish another warehouse where we would serve different areas from that region. Now, if from that warehouse, now if that warehouse is to be established over there, the top management once decided that, actually started over with, they started to look for the location where they needed to build that warehouse. But as soon as another study was conducted, and inventory costs were also considered along with the transportation cost. Well, as we said that when we reduce the transportation cost, the inventory cost goes up, and when we increase the transportation cost, inventory cost would go down. So they were actually targeting to minimize the transport cost, but they did not see the conflicting cost, which was the inventory cost in that case. And so when they included the inventory cost, the whole scenario changed. All of a sudden they realized that while considering the inventory cost, they do not open a warehouse in St. Louis. They plan to open a warehouse in Chicago. Now the aim was, the interesting aspect was that the land was already bought and the St. Louis warehouse was already in construction. But when they realized that the trade-off between transport cost and inventory cost and the total cost concept was applied, and after that analysis they realized such a stark difference in the total cost from these 2 points that they left the St. Louis warehouse under construction and they moved to Chicago, where they finally established a warehouse for that facility. So this is a real life example for a total cost concept. Then moving on, the second aspect was for concept for logistic strategy formulation was differentiated distribution. Now let us realize that not all products should be provided the same level of customer service. For example, we can consider products to be delivered there. We need to evaluate the products that are to be delivered directly to the customer and the products that are to be stored in the warehouses and then delivered to the customer. We need to categorize them, because if we treat all the products in a similar customer service level, then it would be very difficult. Let me give you a real life example. If you go and buy something, this would be not very, you can say from the logistics aspect, but customer service level aspect, because if you go to a shop and buy lots of stuff from there, they would be willing to send a guy with you to deliver that to your car. But if you do not buy, you buy just a few things, they would let you pick it up yourself. From ethical and customer service perspective, that is different, but it is also some intrinsic purpose, because you pay them more, so they behave differently with you. Whenever you buy something in bulk, they are willing to deliver that to your home. But if you buy something not in bulk and smaller chunks, you would need to pick it up yourself. So now let us consider this from the perspective of an industry and from the perspective of logistics department. There are different types of customers. One type of customer would order a product in bulk, right? And one type of a customer would order a product in smaller chunks. Now, based on that, you cannot treat them in one single customer service level. You cannot ensure that home delivery or delivery to the point of use is possible for all of them. So what you need to do is you need to evaluate that in which case the product is to be delivered directly to the customer, and in which type of customer is to be served from the warehouses. You see, so if just simply considering the volume of the order, if a customer is ordering in high volume, for example, in a truckload of something, chemical or anything, then that is to be delivered directly to the customer. But if the orders are not in terms of you can say in high volume, then they need to be served from the warehouse, right? They cannot be delivered directly from the production facility. Secondly, fast moving items are usually placed in the field warehouses. The items that are required repeatedly, for example, fast moving consumer goods or toothpaste and soaps and stuff like that, they are placed in the field warehouses, where they are immediately, the stocks are replenished and they can be retrieved immediately. The items that are of medium speed moving items are placed in fewer regional locations, not in every specific area, but in fewer regional locations, and they can be, the stocks can be provided and to the demand, and demand is fulfilled and they can be replenished with time. And then there are slow moving items which can be stored only at, which need to be stored only at a centralized location and must be delivered at the time the order is placed. You see, so now we have made two categories, that the customer service level would be different in both of these two categories. One is based on the volume of the order placed. If the volume is larger, then that can be served directly from the production facility to the customer. If the order is volume order or smaller, they need to be consolidated to the warehouse, and the consolidated movement should be taken to the warehouse, and from the warehouse they can be served. That would be a lower cost perspective. You cannot treat them all equally, give them the same customer service level. And similarly, we also highlighted over here that fast moving items need to be closest to the customer, then in the field warehouses, then medium moving items can be in the regional locations, and the third one is for example, slow moving items need to be at the centralized location. Now this is another practical aspect. The differentiated distribution system is another practical aspect. Now how, let us discuss an application for that which took place again in USA. A chemical company which manufactured metal coating products for prevention of corrosion in metals. There was some sort of liquid that is, or a paint that is done on metal so that it does not corrodes for its protection. Now it revamped its whole logistics system. What it did was that the truckloads of the items, whenever they were ordered, the whole truckload was delivered directly to the customer. Now, do consider that they produce a wide variety of such metal coating products, different types and different varieties. So those items which were ordered in truckloads, those items were delivered directly to the customer. Then the top 10% of total volume were also shipped directly. Those items which were in the top 10% of the total volume were also shipped directly, and the rest of them were you can say provided through two warehouses and a plant, right? They were stored over there. Now based on this whole redistribution, you see they have differentiated between the customer service level. If you order a truckload of it, it would deliver to you. If you are ordering something in large quantities, then again it would be delivered directly to you. But if you are ordering something from you can say lesser than that, that would be delivered from the warehouse. So you need to differentiate your distribution system. If you do not differentiate between your distribution system, your costs would go up. And actually what they did was that they saved 20% of the total distribution cost from just this simple mechanics of differentiated distribution system. So differentiated distribution is somewhat similar to a mixed strategy. which is another concept for logistics strategy formulation. Now, mixed strategy is there is a pure strategy that everything is dealt with in the same distribution network, but a mixed strategy is that it is based on you can say it can be based on the volume or weight or order size or sales and volume and customer service level that are to be defined. So if you differentiate between them, if you have different strategy for different for example order sizes, then that would be a mixed strategy. A pure strategy has a very good advantage of the administrative ease, that once you have the same strategy for everything, then it is very easy, but it has a higher cost in the long run. Although it has economies of scale, but it would have a higher cost in the long run. So when the products are different from each other in terms of the size of or the weight or order size or sales volume and customer service level, then a mixed strategy would be more applicable. Mixed strategy can be in terms of, like, for example, how inventory is managed. Mixed strategy can be in a sense that how what type of transportation mode is used. Mixed strategy can be in terms of what type of warehouse is used, whether it is a public or private warehouse. So it can be in different perspectives. So in terms of retailer, there is an example again in US. There was a retailer of prescription drugs which had 6 warehouses across the US. Now it had a facility in Pittsburgh which was being overloaded, which was overburdened. Now it planned to establish a new facility in Pittsburgh which was costing $7 million US dollars. So what happened was that they realized that actually when they were only considering the supporting that warehouse, that 7 million seemed worth it. But when they realized that actually the cost of this 7 million, the initial investment, is much more than the alternatives that they have, they should not stay fixed on that strategy. They should reevaluate. They should, rather than having a pure strategy, they should have a mixed strategy. Someone suggested to the head of logistics management that rather you can have all private setup, building your own setup, you can use a combination of public and private warehouses. Now if you use if you hire another public warehouse, that would cost much less than constructing your own warehouse. Now in this case, in our previous example, the cost of establishing the Pittsburgh warehouse, the new additional Pittsburgh warehouse, was 7 million. What they did was that they hired another public warehouse, in which case their total cost was $3 million only. In fact, $300,000, not even millions. So there was a substantial difference by using a mixed strategy rather than a pure strategy. So they decided to actually reduce the total cost. They used a mix of this is again somehow related to total cost concept as well. They in place of all the private warehousing facilities or all public warehousing facilities, they use somewhere in between, the combination of public and private warehouses. Then another concept that that we can discuss is postponement. Now postponement is basically the delay of the final product as long as possible. Another concept. You would be amazed why it is done, but I would give you some examples and explain that to you. Now, one is time postponement. Avoid shipping of goods in anticipation of when demand will occur. You do not ship the good in advance. You wait for the order. You have made the product, you wait for the order, and you deliver whenever it is required at the exact moment. That is time postponement. Then another aspect is avoid creating the form of the product in anticipation of that form. That is form postponement, that this form of the product would be required. So you postpone actually making that form until that form is known to you. So that is form postponement. These are certain logistic strategies that firms actually use to reduce their costs. Time postponement can be done to reduce the warehousing costs. You avoid shipping the goods to certain rather than holding many stocking points at different locations, many warehousing facilities at different locations. You avoid shipping the good. you only ship the good to the customer whenever it is necessary. And like for example, JC Penney actually fills orders on demand from relatively only few warehouses. Rather than having lots of stocking points, it fulfills its orders through only a few warehouses. And similarly, the Dell computers, it practices form postponement. And Sherwin-Williams has a variety of different paint colors, but practices again the form postponement. Once the order is placed that exactly this color tone is required, then they mix those colors and deliver that. Once somebody orders Dell computer that a computer of this specification is required, they manufacture that and send that. So these are form postponements. Rather than making millions of types of different computers, which cannot be, even the technologies might go obsolete, and maybe different types of variety of colors for the paint, and storing them and waiting for the customer to buy those, they wait for the customer to order, and then they create that form and send it to the customer. I guess this would be the last slide that we would be discussing in today's lecture. What I would do is that I would go through the lecture once to just summarize it for last few slides that we have, the most important ones. This is one of the examples of, there are 6 different types of you can say concepts that we wanted to discuss. Now in these which are related to logistic strategy formulation. The first one was the total cost concept. Total cost concept was when there is a trade-off between conflicting cost, and you discuss you analyze that trade-off, and you use the point where the total cost is minimum. Then there is differentiated distribution. We discussed that not all products are required to be given the service of the same level. You can differentiate between in terms of the volume of the goods and that are being delivered, as well as you can also store your goods and define your logistic strategy based on the type of the item that you're delivering. Fast moving goods can be stored near the customers, medium moving goods can be stored a little away from that few stocking points, and slow moving goods can be centralized in one centralized location. Then we also discussed the mixed strategy, in which there was a pure strategy and a mixed strategy. Pure strategy is like following a similar logistic strategy for each and everything, but in case of mixed strategy, you consider like different products in terms of their weight, in terms of their size, or in terms of their volume or customer service level, and you handle it in that sense. For an example, we discussed that you can use all private warehouses and or all public warehouses, and you would use where a combination which would have the lowest cost. Then we discussed postponement. Postponement is a concept for reducing the transportation and inventory costs. Is one aspect of strategy formulation, where you either postpone the time, which is time postponement. You postpone the time when the order is actually placed, postpone the product till the time when the order is placed, and the second one is form postponement, in which you postpone the form of the product, the shape, until the time the order is placed, until the time it is known. JC Penney, for example, it actually files orders on demand from relatively only few warehouses. It delivers when the order is placed. And Dell Computers and Sherwin-Williams actually creates the form of their products once the form is known that exactly this type of the product is required. Okay, see you soon for the upcoming lectures. I hope you understood whatever the concept that we have discussed today. From now on, we would be going a little faster because we have lots of material to cover as well in logistics management. Take care, best of luck. Do let me know if you have any queries.